You'll get an indication when it happens.
Good evening, everyone. I am Mayor Lovely Warren, and I am excited to join each of you to talk about a very important issue in our city. Tonight is a milestone in our efforts to reform and reinvent policing in the city of Rochester. I understand the urgent nature of this work, and I'm grateful to our working group partners and all those who continue to join us in this effort, including you who have joined us via Zoom or watching us on YouTube tonight. As you already know, as I already have told you before, my uncle was the first person to receive compensation from a lawsuit that he had filed against the city of Rochester for police officers brutally beating him back in the 1960s. So this work is very, very important to me. It is personal to me. It is personal to my family. And I want to get it right for all of you, the citizens of Rochester. I believe that we can do this through working together and through partnership. And that is why I am so excited to announce these draft recommendations and our response to the governor's Executive Order 203. The draft response and recommendations we'll discuss tonight are available at cityofrochester.gov/executive order. It is a lengthy document because there's a lot of information there. We also have addendums from all of our partners, except for one who we're waiting for their recommendations. This entire plan must be adopted by City Council by April 1st, 2021, according to the governor's executive order. Governor Cuomo provided specific direction regarding how to complete this important process, and we have followed that guidance to the letter. The requirements are as follows: review the needs of the community served by its policing agency, evaluate the department's current policies and practices, establish policies that allow police to effectively and safely perform their duties, involve the community in the discussion, develop policy recommendations resulting from this review, offer a plan for public comment, present the plan to the local legislative body to ratify or adopt it, and certify adoption of the plan to the state budget director on or before April 1st, 2021. We are at the step where we are involving our community in the discussion and asking for your public comment. The working group partners and the people that I've reached out to City Council President Loretta Scott to assign 2 members of City Council to represent them on this. This document has not been shared with the full council. We will be sending this document after we hear from you, the public, and updating that, and I'll talk more about that later. Joining us is Vice President Willie Lightfoot from City Council, as well as Councilman Miguel Melendez Jr. We also have our interim Rochester Police Chief, Cynthia Harriet Sullivan, and her team. The great Reverend Lewis Stewart, President of the United Christian Leadership Ministries. Of course, our fave Deputy Chief Wayne Harris, retired Race Commission co-chair of the Policing Work Group. We have Shawnee Wilson, the chair of the Police Accountability Board, Connor Reynolds from the Police Accountability Board as well. Unfortunately, the PAB reps could not be here tonight due to other commitments that they have relating to their important work, as you have heard from them a lot recently. But I want to thank them for the many hours of hard work and being at the table with us throughout this process. I also want to thank our law department, Shawnee from our law department, who was very helpful, along with, of course, Doreen Kirkmeyer from our planning team, who assembled this document, worked tirelessly and very long hours to make sure that this document was prepared and ready to go to you, the public, as a draft. And of course, our communications team, and I can go on and on, but this is truly about providing you information tonight. First, I want to go through where we've been and and where we believe that we need to go. And so in 2014, we made the recommendation for police section office reorganization. In 2015, we created a gun part in the Hall of Justice. In 2016, we launched and rolled out our body-worn camera program. In 2019, we decided to discontinue the red light camera program here because it disproportionately affected members of our community. In 2019, the creation of the Police Accountability Board was created after you, the citizens, supported City Council and the city in establishing the PAB. And we are now in 2020 proposing a newly hired RPD officers to reside in the city, which has been introduced for adoption by our local state legislature, and we're waiting for them to pass that legislation. When we talk about our progress in engaging our residents in our neighborhoods, we have also made progress with our Books and Bears program, our Clergy on Patrol, and most notably, our recruitment efforts with our local churches. These efforts are our past successes, and they took us coming together as a community to achieve them, and they are proof that we can succeed. But before I share the recommendations and the path forward, I want to spend a moment discussing the current state of our police department. And when you go through this document, you'll see our current state of our police department. This was outlined for us to do in the governor's executive order recommendations or blueprint. Our PD currently has 724 sworn officers, 126 civilian positions in the department. There are 4 areas of responsibility. There's the Office of the Chief, the Operations Bureau, the Administration Bureau, which provides back office support, but importantly houses the RPD's Research and Evaluation section, which manages the open data portal. We have the Community Affairs Bureau, which is responsible for the department's outreach initiatives and providing residents ways to contract and connect with RPD. And of course, the Operations Bureau, where most of the officers on daily patrol reside, along with the Special Events Section and Special Operations Bureau, which notably manages the body-worn camera program. The Office of the Chief, of course, is extensive, and it's the management of the department, and the Professional Standards Section resides, and that's where we investigate complaints of misconduct. And as we talk about the racial gap between RPD officers and city residents, 87% of our officers are white, while just 47% of Rochesterians are white. 87% of our officers are men, while just 48% of of Rochesterians are men. 94% of our officers live outside of our city. 94%. We must further address these challenges by our recruitment efforts, and we have some recommendations to do so that I will talk about later. The number of officers compared to other cities. An important finding in this report is the number of police officers in Rochester compared to other cities of our size. Outside of Birmingham, Alabama, Rochester has more officers per capita than every other city that has between 150,000 to 200,000 residents. Rochester also has 67% more officers per resident than similarly sized cities with similar crime rates. Simply put, we understand we significantly have more police officers than cities like ours. We recognize that, and this plan will make some recommendations about that in the end. When we look at the data and our trends, Part 1 or serious crimes remain near or at historic lows. That's what the data shows. In 2018, Part 1 crime was at its lowest rate in 35 years and has held steady since. Violent crime is down 38% since its peak in the 1990s. While 2020, we saw a significant increase in violence. We believe that that was due to the pandemic and what was happening nationally, and it occurred nationally across the board, but it's still Very, very concerning to all of us. While last year was very concerning, when looked at in the total and the data that shows us that Rochester is still much safer than it was 20 years ago, even accounting for the change in population. However, we all understand that perception is reality. And we know that there are a lot of people that are in our city that do not feel safe. And we have more work to do to change that perception. When we look at our costs for service, they are declining, as well with all the costs in 2020. They're 8% below our 2016 numbers. However, the length of time that each of our officers are spending responding to calls has increased. This potentially speaks to the need for alternatives to traditional policing with residents to resolve issues. More study is needed to understand how this change creates potential for options to replace police officers and police response or provide a co-response to assist our residents. In response to recent events, including the tragic death of Daniel Pruitt, Rochester created a Crisis Intervention Services Office within the renamed Department of Human and Recreation Services to begin the process of providing alternative response options to deal with mental health service calls and other non-violent calls made to 911 and now 211. Crisis Intervention Services is comprised of 4 teams or 4 units led by our Commissioner of DRIVES, Dr. Danielle Lyman Torres. Family Crisis Intervention Team, which assists victims after crisis has occurred and works to connect victims to services. We also have the Victims Assistance Unit, which is primarily focused on helping victims navigate the legal system, but also interfaces with the Family Crisis Team to provide other supports. We have the Homicide Response Team, which responds immediately to homicide scenes to support the victim's loved ones and also provides mediation services to try to stop the cycle of violence. And the new in-person crisis team, which is ramping up to provide an alternative to police response or as a co-response with RPD to assist residents dealing with mental health, substance abuse, and other personal crises. A discussion of the Crisis Intervention Services Office is important. It serves as a foundation for many of the recommendations contained within our response to Executive Order 203. The recommendations are divided into 10 major areas, including accountability, community engagement and programming, data, technology, and transparency, fostering a community-oriented culture, officer wellness, policy, police policy, strategies and practices, RPD recruitment, resizing the RPD, our response to mental health cause, and training. And that you will see is in alphabetical order. Tonight, I will discuss a number of these recommendations from each of the various areas. But due to the number of recommendations, I won't be able to cover them all. Remember, you can read the entire draft report, including all of the recommendations, on our website at www.cityofrochester.gov/executive order 203. I often receive calls and emails regarding firing an officer immediately. The current state of affairs does not allow the chief or I to do this. Attempting to do so will cost you, the taxpayers, more money in the long run. We will be required to bring the officer back and ultimately be precluded from terminating that officer at a later date for not following the process this outlined. Additionally, you, the taxpayers, will be responsible for any cost associated with the lawyer's fees. That's very troubling, but that is where we are. And that is why we're proposing in our recommendations to petition the state of New York to amend and allow for an exemption for Rochester in the Taylor Law and the Tri-Borough Agreement to allow the city to be able to terminate an officer immediately for cause and enable us to develop a completely new collective bargaining agreement. We're also asking to create strict disciplinary rules banning discriminatory enforcement patterns like broken windows theory, structural racism, racial profiling, stop and frisk, and pretextual stops. We will fully comply with the Police Accountability Board's authority as outlined in the city charter. We will advocate and we recommend that we advocate for additional resources and financial support for programs such as mental health, youth and recreation, job development, pathways to peace, conflict resolution programs, and other evidence-based programs. Implement and support programs that provide increased and effective engagement, assess how the RPD in the city can offer help to build trust, transparency, and legitimacy within and through all of these programs. We move on to our data, technology, and transparency. We are looking to allocate funds to boost support for the RPD Office of Business Intelligence and other citywide data analytics to ensure accurate data is released to you in a timely and accessible manner. We would like to mandate the collection and regular reporting of demographic information of individuals that officers interact with, arrest, do traffic investigations, street stops, personnel complaints, and uses of force, and include in our open data portal information on if and how RPD uses less than lethal weapons, no-knock warrants, and SWAT activity. Also include materials and other data. We want to publish and aggregate data on how officers who are Black and Brown, women, and LGBTQ are disciplined, promoted, and terminated. Complete transparency. We need to improve the use of our body-worn cameras, and in the spirit of partnership with mutual goals for safety, security, and justice, strengthen the community body-worn camera panel. Using existing RPD funding, we need to provide the training and resources to ensure that our officers are properly trained on our cameras and make sure that we update that over and over again. Find a body-worn camera vendor that can provide the technology necessary for improving our ability to collect and use the data from our body-worn cameras. As we continue on to fostering a community-oriented culture, we want to continue furthering the work of President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, which leads with a philosophy that includes a sense of humility and empathy, and sets the stage for adopting community-oriented policing leadership. We want to fund policies and practices that begin to insulate the RPD from systematic oppression. We need to be proactive when it comes down to our officer wellness, because we know that officers that have the support and the wellness that they need will be that more effective to you, our residents. So we need to proactively conduct routine wellness needs assessments through surveys with our officers. We need to conduct fitness and annual psychological evaluations and provide trauma-related officer support. Promote peer support as an effective method to assist officers throughout their career, but more importantly, following a traumatic event. Provide chaplain services as another method to provide support to officers following a traumatic event. I also want to note, many officers may be hesitant to utilize outside counseling services following a traumatic event. Many are willing to turn to their fellow officer for support, and we need to make sure that we allow for that to happen and encourage it to happen. We need, and we're asking in these draft recommendations for new police policies, strategies, and practices. At the heart of it, We need to place the sanctity of human life at the core of RPD's policing philosophy. Currently, RPD's policy does not include an express sanctity of life provision. We need to mandate the completion of incident reports that include demographic data to better track stops made by the RPD. Develop policies limiting the use of spit socks or hoods and outlining strict guidelines for appropriate and safe use of spit socks if and when they are used. Create and enforce laws and policies related to the use of breathing restrictions in accordance with New York State law, and create training and disciplinary rules that will be enforced if there are violations of this policy. Make clear that the department policy requires officers to attempt to de-escalate their encounters with members of our community. And institute a policy, excuse me, and institute a policy that officers shall not handcuff juveniles aged 12 and under unless the juvenile presents an imminent danger to themselves or others. The current draft doesn't specify imminent. However, my recommendation would be to change that. And we will also be looking for your recommendations as well. We want to improve the RPD's body-worn cameras program by strengthening the procedures to ensure their use and enhance technology to allow a faster redaction and release of video. We aim to reduce RPD personnel within the next 5 to 10 years so it can reallocate those resources to other programs. Identify tasks handled by uniformed officers that could be handled by our civilian individuals, and consider reinstituting or rehiring a commissioner of public safety who has the final say on both budget and management. As we move on to our recommendations on the response to mental health cause, we want to significantly increase the number of officers with crisis intervention training, such as to make a significant number of CIT trained officers available on each shift. The RPD CIT program is an important tool for ensuring that RPD officers have the requisite skills to respond appropriately to mental health crisis. Support the newly formed PIC team and evaluate its work and invest accordingly for its success. This is a newly formed organization and division and team. We want to make sure that the pilot is assessed, evaluated, that it works for all of our residents, and then make sure we make the investment. Increase funding for first responder systems that appropriately replace police with social workers, mental health providers, and other non-police personnel. Support and overhaul the civil service hiring system. When we talk about RPD recruitment, one of the things that we need to address is a bias against communities of color. And to me, it starts at the very beginning, and that is in our hiring practices, civil service. It should not be determined by how well you score on an exam if you will be an effective officer on our streets. We need to revamp that. We need support from the state of New York to do that. And we will be advocating and asking you to help us advocate for that. We want to create a civilian public safety interview panel to assess candidates for the Rochester Police Department, and ask the federal courts to update our consent decree. Many people don't know the city of Rochester has been under a consent decree since the late 1970s. Currently, that consent decree caps our minority representation in the RPD ranks to 25%. This change would allow us to hire additional officers of color above the consent decree amount of 25%. This number dates back to when people of color only represented 25% of the city's population. Now, as we said earlier, people of color represent well over 50% of the city of Rochester's population. So our consent decree should reflect that, and we need to petition the federal courts to allow us to be able to update that consent decree. And that would allow us to increase the number of people of color that are in our ranks. We also want to increase the recruitment for the Career Pathways to Public Safety program offered by the Rochester City School District and the PREP program offered by MCC to firmly establish a direct pipeline for city youth to enter the ranks of the Rochester Police Department. And as I said earlier, we would like to institute a city residency requirement for newly hired police officers. Currently, 94% of our officers live outside of our city. We will need state support for that. The legislation has been introduced, and we're hopeful that it will pass in Albany. We also have draft recommendations as it pertains to training. We want to advocate for change in New York state law to require that DCJS mandate explicit and implicit bias training on systematic racism, cultural competency, and procedural justice in the basic course for police officer certification. We want to make sure that we de-escalate and train our officers to do so through training and intervene and make it a priority to prevent the use of excessive force. We would like to reinforce our police officers as servant protectors as opposed to warriors through training. And that's a mindset. And that's training that we believe that we can do and accomplish. So let me be clear. This is only a draft. This is only a draft. The representation on the working groups are only one voice among many. That's why we have asked them to take this draft back to their respective organizations to get feedback. None of the entire groups have seen these recommendations. We asked them to send a representative, they assigned a representative, and the representatives will take that information back. And as you are reviewing this information, they will be reviewing it as well and providing feedback to our office. The mayor's office, city council, and all of the working group members will be updating this all along, but we wanted to get this draft to you so that you can digest it, you can review it. As we said, this is a very long document with a number of addendums, but we would like for you to take the time to review it and provide us the feedback. You can provide us feedback in many different ways. Virtually, you can go to the city's website, www.cityofrochester.gov/Executive Order 203. We will also be holding feedback events with community organizations. If you would like to host us for one of those events, please email mayor@cityofrochester.gov to request an event with your group. And we will come, we will present this information, and we will share it with your organization, and we will get your feedback. We also have Officer Moses Robinson from our Community Affairs Office reaching out to various groups and setting up meetings. We will also be hosting a telephone town hall to allow residents without internet services to participate so that we can provide them with this information as well. We know many of our senior citizens do not have access to the internet and access to computers, and therefore we want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to provide us feedback. I also want to mention that the Faith Leaders Roundtable has provided a document that we have included in the appendices of this draft, We have a meeting set up with them to review their recommendations, but due to the time when we received it, those ideas are not incorporated into the current version. So please remember, again, that this is a draft and we will continue to gain and use additional ideas as we proceed. We are going to ask our working group members, again, to share information on their feedback sessions. Many of them have already had public meetings on different information that they are working on, and we want to make sure that they continue to do that, and as well as provide that feedback and share it with us so that it can be included in the next draft. Again, this is a first draft. We thought it was imperative to get it to you, the public, as well as all of our community organizations, to take the time so that you can take the time to review and provide us with updates. Let me be specific about one of our partners, the Race Commission recommendations. You will not see their recommendations in this document because we have not received it yet. The Race Commission is continuing to do their work. Please note that although former Deputy Chief Wayne Harris is a co-chair of the Public Safety Work Group of the Race Commission, he is one voice of many on that work group. We anticipate him sharing their work with us once they have released their recommendations overall from the Race Commission. The Race Commission's charge is broader than simply policing. And I want to share it with you because I think that there was some misinformation shared. One, inventory and assess current laws and policies that either promote or are intended to implement institutional and structural biases, racism, and inequities in the city of Rochester and Monroe County. Two, provide recommendations to enhance current laws and policies to increase effectiveness and or sunset laws or policies that are ineffective or no longer applicable. It is understanding that this work is broader than simply public safety. Again, we look forward to the Race Commission's recommendations, and I'm grateful for all the work that they have done, all the community engagement sessions, and we are excited to be able to hear and for them to present their plan to this community when they are ready. We want to make sure that their information is included in this draft, in the final document, and that's why you will see that their information is forthcoming. Your feedback will guide the creation of future drafts. We will continue to collect that feedback and make revisions until the draft plan is submitted to City Council for their review and public process on March 4th. The last day that we will be accepting public feedback and information for this part, meaning our draft, the administration's responsibility, will be March 4th. We ask that during this time that you take a deep dive, take the time to look at this information. If you have any questions, please contact us, invite us to your sessions, because this is truly going to be transformative. This response in the work of policing reform is ongoing. We got information and support and recommendations from one of our policing experts, Wilmer Hill, but this is only in response to Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 203 and based on the guidebook that he provided to us as a guide. There is a lot of more work to do that may not be included in this response, but we again want to hear from you. These are recommendations that we want you to look at, for you to provide us information on, and for us to update that and be able to provide that to City Council. Now, I would like to turn this meeting over to Vice President Lightfoot, who will share with you the City Council approval process and what they will be doing to make sure that your thoughts are incorporated into the final draft before they vote. Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for a great presentation. It's also to the rest of the working group members. I want to congratulate you for this first draft. looking quite forward to the public comment that will be provided in the next 30 days. Upon that final draft after March 4th, there will be a piece of legislation that will be drafted as a result of all of that, given to council by our second week of March meeting. So our March legislative council meeting, which I believe is the second week of Tuesday of that particular month. When we receive that legislation, we then have the ability to take that and start our public comment process of approving that legislation. And that will exist with our normal processes. We will probably hold that legislation so that we can have a larger, greater time to also seek more public comment. And we will probably end up having a special city council meeting at the end of March where we will be able to vote on this particular legislation in its final form. That will be our process, and we look forward to extensive community engagement over the next 30 days, as well as when our process starts after we receive the legislation around the second week of March. We will then begin even more community engagement with our normal process, and we will be voting on this by the end of March.
Thank you, Vice President Lightfoot. As I said, we have many community partners that have their own process and own way of engaging the public. And I want to give them an opportunity to share their outreach or how they will be sharing this plan and providing feedback to the group. And so I'll start first with Reverend Lewis Stewart.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor. We are going to continually refine our proposals, and we're going to reach out to the community and really solicit their response and feedback to the proposals. And we're going to continue to add to that, and City Council and hopefully our working group will be receiving that and sending that on back to the Mayor's office before the deadline. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Stewart. We also have Wayne Harris here as the co-chair for the Policing Committee and the Race Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Warren. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this evening. As the mayor said, the Race Commission has not completed its report yet. However, we will be taking the draft of Executive Order 203 response report, submitting it to the entire Race Commission, as well as the police working group for the Race Commission to get their feedback, which we will then put into writing and submit back to the city, as well as submitting the final report from the Race Commission, so that can be included as well. So look forward to continued dialogue, and thank you very much for having us a part of this.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. Now I want to offer the opportunity for Councilmember Melendez. I know that he wears two hats, one for one of our Latino community organizations, and we want to make sure that this draft is converted to Spanish and being able to be given out to our residents that are Spanish speaking. And so we also know that he has been leading many community efforts as it pertains to COVID-19 and other responses. And so Councilmember Melendez, I know that you're here as your council member, but also wanted to give you an opportunity to speak as well about our outreach to the community that speaks Spanish.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, thank you all for being here tonight, for being a part of this effort. This is going to be a transformative long-term work. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us, but I think that we can create new opportunities for the city of Rochester. In the Latino community, we will certainly, we do convene a roundtable group at Ibero, which is consistent with our efforts to engage leaders in the community. So we'll start there. That includes various organizations from Latinas Unidas to La Cumbre, which is a collective group of folks who are working together on a Latino agenda, to other organizations that have just been engaged in the Latino community in various ways. In addition to that, we will reach out to the Community Engagement Task Force that convenes every week from Monroe County. We'll have some conversations there, and we'll try to expand as much into the community as we can through our various networks. Thank you for the opportunity to share that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Melendez. Again, I want to thank our team from City Hall, our Director of Planning, Doreen Kirkmeyer, our representative from the Law Department, Shani Curry Mitchell, who's done an extraordinary job of making sure that our report aligns with the current law and what we need to do to propose new additional laws. I also want to thank Chief Harriet Sullivan and her team for their work on this. Again, the PAB was not able to join with us tonight because they are in a different session. They are doing some great work in our community, and we want to make sure that that we acknowledge them and acknowledge their contributions. They will again take this information back to their organization and provide some updates. Now, when you look at the final plan, in the appendices, you will see the reports from each of, or the recommendations from each of the subcommittee groups, like UCLM, as well as the PAB. The Race Commissions is not there yet. It will be updated. We also have the Faith Roundtable. We have some additional information on best practices that was provided to us by leading policing experts, Wilmer Hill. In the appendix section, you can go and look at and review each of the group's recommendations. We wanted to put that there so that you would be able to see what was recommended by each of the entities, and then how they were incorporated into the final draft that we released today. Again, we're asking you, the citizens and the people of Rochester, to review this document, to make your recommendations to us, and or to invite us to present this to your organization. And even starting tomorrow, we have somebody on the books that we will present to tomorrow. We're thankful for your time. Once we receive all the information from by March 4th, that will be incorporated into a final draft. That draft will be sent to City Council. As Vice President Lightfoot has already outlined the City Council process, and there are hopes to have this completed and voted on by the end of March, into the governor's office by April 1st. We thank you all for tuning in tonight. We ask you to give us the information that you would like to see in this document. Now, of course, there may be some things that you recommend that may not make it into 203 document, but maybe some things that we work on individually. But we want to be very, very clear. Whatever feedback is provided, we will have that included in the appendix section that will go to City Council and ultimately be part of the final draft. Now, again, our planning director, Doreen Kirkmeyer, has put together an extensive document for us. We truly appreciate that. And it is also being updated and populated with the information that you will provide when you visit our website. Please listen for opportunities where we will engage with our barbershops and beauty salons and other organizations in the community. For those that may not be able to be a part of the Teletown Hall or one of the other respective outreach programs that we have from our organizational groups. I want to take a moment to thank our interpreter, Elisa, for being here today and interpreting for us. We truly appreciate it. We want to make sure that we are comprehensive and inclusive of our entire community. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Please take the time to review this document. God bless you all.